screenfiles.com with Trailer into Reaction. What I'm talking about today is the new trailer for Stephen DeKnight's Pacific Rim Uprising. I wrote a review for the teaser on my WordPress page, screenfiles.com, and I'm very torn by this trailer. I haven't seen it yet, but the existence of it has torn me because I'm a huge Guillermo del Toro fan. I've seen virtually all of his movies, and he brings such an artistry, such a passion to his projects that you can't help but root for the man. I really like him. I haven't met him, so I know that's kind of contradictory. He's a total stranger. How do you like a total stranger? I understand there is a bit of a schism between the reality and the fantasy. I get that. But nonetheless, perhaps I should phrase what I know of him. I really like. He seems passionate. His movies seem heartfelt. There doesn't seem to be a cynical bone in the man's body. So even when his projects don't exactly work, and it happens, I can't help but admire Guillermo del Toro. And also, what I like is that he's very plain spoken. He curses up a storm, as I do typically when I talk, and he doesn't mince words. He says what he thinks, and I like that about him. Never mind, his films are beautiful and interesting. Plot tends to be not always his strongest point, but when you go into something with so much love, I can roll with that, you know? As I said earlier, not a cynical bone in this man's body. Love his work. So he did the first Pacific Rim, and it's has so much heart and so much soul, and it didn't do very well domestically, making, I believe, just over $100 million in the United States. And this bothered me at the time, and it bothers me now. Reason being, you can have those god-awful Transformers movies make billions, at least $1 billion in this market. Movies that are just literally like a machine crank them out. They have no soul, they have no heart, they're just exercises in filmmaking. And they're cynical and at times sexist and ugly, and I can't stand them. So to have Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim, which is essentially giant robot versus kaiju or giant monster movie, not do well in this market was a bit of a shock and a disappointment to me. But remember, movies are more than one market at this point. So you have foreign markets as well, particularly places like China and a lot of smaller markets that can combine to put a movie over the top, even if it doesn't do well domestically. And that was the case with Pacific Rim. It opened really strong in China, and it did well overseas. So on a $180 million budget, it earned somewhere in a ballpark of just over $400 million. That's not a great return, by the way. Even with the foreign box office, it's not a lot of money, relatively speaking. But powers that be at Universal and Legendary Pictures decided to make a sequel. Awesome. But for reasons to this day I'm not certain about, Guillermo del Toro didn't direct. And that bothers me. It bothers me because studio politics, or any politics between people in general, can be really nasty and mean-spirited. Now I would hate to think that del Toro got the shit end of the stick because he wouldn't back down on what he wanted for this movie. I don't know if that's true, and I'm not saying it's true, but it's entirely possible. On the other hand, del Toro is busy as hell, and what he sometimes do, and other directors may do as well. It's just that, as I alluded to earlier, del Toro will tell you about things, and so he doesn't hide what's happening in his film making career and his, as well as his goals and aspirations. So it's very possible that he bit off more than he can chew, and that he wasn't available to direct the sequel to Pacific Rim. So I don't know why he didn't direct it, but it bothered me that he didn't direct it. He was replaced by Stephen DeKnight. I haven't seen, I don't think I've seen an entire episode of Spartacus ever, frankly. DeKnight was, I believe, the showrunner for the first season of Netflix's Daredevil, and he worked on numerous projects with Joss Whedon as well. And I've had the pleasure of having occasional Twitter exchanges with Stephen DeKnight, and he reminds me of Guillermo del Toro in some ways, in that he's very plain spoken. He seems very unpretentious, especially people who achieved a certain point in their careers who haven't let that go to their heads. From what I've learned from Twitter conversations with DeKnight, as well as just reading his tweets in general, he has opinions on things, he has views on things, and he's not afraid to let you know about it. And he's very blunt, and I like that. I mean, some people may be put off by that. I find that interesting because, like with Guillermo del Toro, that's how you learn what people actually think. They're not trying to be polite necessarily. They're not trying to be kind. They're just telling you what's on their minds. And I like that. Particularly when what's on your mind is well considered, is seeking a fairness, not being reactive in a mean-spirited way, which, as far as I can tell, DeKnight isn't. So I think he's a worthy successor to Del Toro, at least in a personality sense. A filmmaking sense, I can't say. As I said, I haven't seen a lot of his work. But the trailer for Pacific Rim Uprising dropped today, a few minutes ago, and I'm going to take a look at it now with you. Okay, let's look at Pacific Rim Uprising. 3, 2, 1. Green screening. It's okay.
We were born to a world at war.
The color palette has already changed from the first film.
And the monsters we create to stop them. We thought we had sacrificed enough. But the war we thought we finished. It's just beginning. And the only thing standing in front of the apocalypse is us. It doesn't matter where you came from, who believed in you and who didn't. This is our time. This is our chance to make a difference. Get it done!
Kaiju don't, or at least in the first movie, kaijus didn't fire missiles. So, who are they? Why are they fighting each other?
There's something you need to see.
Vern Gorman's back. It's always cool.
He's pretty nice.
Okay, well that was a trailer for Pacific Rim Uprising, and as I mentioned earlier, the color palette has changed. What Guillermo del Toro tended to do was he used color, and he does this in all his movies, in fact, but it's most evident in Blade 2 and Pacific Rim, Crimson Peak as well. He uses color to denote mood and feel, so his movies will have a slight tint to them. So Pacific Rim, if I recall, often had a bluish tint to certain scenes, denoting certain things. This movie just tends to have done away with that. And that's okay, because again, remember, it's coming from another director. It looks good. I'm still not understanding the Uprising. And if you recall from the trailer, and I mentioned it as well, you see Gypsy Danger evading a missile. Again, remember, the title of this movie is Pacific Rim Uprising. Uprising against who? The first movie involved and I talk about this a little bit in my WordPress page as well. I'll put a link to it. But the first movie involved the humans against an invasion by extra-dimensional aliens who came through a rift in the Pacific Ocean. This movie seems to be we fighting ourselves to some extent. So is there a prop? And the trailer alludes to it as well. Why are Jaegers fighting each other? Why are Jaegers fighting the military? So there's something going on here that, at least based on the first movie, I'm not quite understanding, but that's okay. I only ask that within the context of the movie it makes sense. You don't have to do something I expect for me to enjoy a movie. You have to do something that at least has a basis in logic to make me enjoy the movie. So that this seems to be going places I didn't expect from the first movie, I'm perfectly okay with, as long as it makes sense. If it's going to get outlandish and weird, and just totally have no basis in logic, the movie's logic, I don't care. But it looks good. We'll see if everything gels as I hope it does. This is Brian from ScreenFiles.com with Trailer into Reaction. Peace.